Welcome back. For the love of God. Holy shit, I have a loud voice. Welcome back. Nope, still peeking. Hello, welcome back. Welcome back, Nope. Welcome back. Why? Test. Okay? I guess this is fine. Alright, so you're playing Dungeons and Dragons or writing a fantasy novel or whatever, and your world has magic. Cool. Spells, wizards, fireballs, I love that. But why does it still look like this?
Come on then. What? How about you?
Why are we always stuck in a vaguely European 1300s with some light sparkles on top? Like, this world has teleportation, but it also has no plumbing? Come on. There are general stores that sell rope, torches, a small loaf of bread, some ball bearings, and apparently nothing else. Today, we're doing another deep dive. What would actually happen if the world adapted to magic? What would that world look like? First of all, let's take a look at what we know. If we're looking at Dungeons and Dragons or a fantasy world that you're creating, magic exists, it's real, it's documented, you said it was and now it's a thing, it's repeatable, it's in your world, and it can heal wounds, it can create fire from nothing, it can bend gravity, and it can raise the dead. So if magic is consistent and it's repeatable, and your wizards aren't just waking up every morning rolling on a cosmic gacha to see what spell they got, or gotcha? I don't know. Then magic isn't just magic, it's just a different kind of science. It's infrastructure, it's the invisible system that would power everything in the world. If even 5% of the population can cast mending, prestidigitation, or mage hand, I just had flashbacks to my prestidigitation video and the horror of trying to pronounce that for an entire video. You've already broken half of the medieval economy. No more cobblers, no more laundromats. Are laundromats a medieval thing? Or is that just modern and I put it in? No more cobblers, no more public bathhouses. I'll just change it. I'm the god of my world. I can just do that. No more hauling crates when you can just summon a floating hand to do it for you. And let's be clear, these aren't high-level spells. I'm just talking about cantrips here, which it's just the magical equivalent of knowing how to use Google. So what does a world actually look like when magic isn't just background noise? Well, let's break it down. Now, I know that some people like this vibe, this medieval fantasy village vibe. I like that vibe. I've been creating an entire world on that vibe. There's comfort in that rustic tavern and the blacksmith hammering away and those torchlit roads. But today, I want to play devil's advocate because if magic works and people are smart, and they usually are, it would change everything. Civilization wouldn't be stuck, it would evolve. So let's actually zoom out and talk about that scale. Look around you right now, just go look outside your window. Our entire real world runs on invisible forces. We have electricity, we have code, we have fluid dynamics. We don't even think about most of that stuff. So if your world has access to arcane forces that can break reality, that becomes the new baseline, that new science, the new tech tree, the new skill tree. Think about it, the Iron Age changed everything because iron was strong.
Apes! Together, strong.
The Arcane Age, that's a whole different beast. It's not about tools at that point, it's about bending the laws of physics. So let's just start with cities, because this is where everything changes, right? Real world cities are shaped by the needs of their time. You need access to water, you need trade routes, you need farmland and defense. That's why so many ancient cities were built on rivers or hilltops. But when create water is a spell, or when teleportation circles exist, that logic goes out the windows. Cities would be designed up, not out. Why? Because spells like Wall of Stone and Move Earth make vertical construction easy, fast, and very, very cheap. Zoning isn't about where the carts can turn, it's more about where the ley lines run, right? Streets are lit by continuously burning lanterns thanks to continual flame. Trash disposal is left to prestidigitation. Sewage diverted and purified by control water or purify food and drink. And fire safety is just a bunch of local druids that create water. You know, you can have sidewalks levitate, you can have bridges that float, and wealthy people could live in literal sky districts, like in some crazy dystopian future. You would have teleportation hubs instead of highways, elemental tram cars that replace anything that's horse-drawn. Buildings are just completely reshaped because of access to magic. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that it isn't just some mystical version of the 1300s. It is a literal fantasy world that's built more like Singapore meets the Jetsons, with the design sensibility of someone who knows that gravity is optional. And again, I just want to point out that these aren't even the luxury features of society. These are just the public works that I'm talking about. Because just like we figured out aqueducts and steam engines, some clever nerd in this world would have figured out, hey, if we put a rune here, boom, no more cholera. And that's not even taking things into account like transportation. Why are people still using wagons when you can literally just teleport? Now, if you really want to make your campaign a delight, you need Describe. Now, instead of talking to you about it, I decided it's probably better just to show you. So here's 30 seconds of ambient sounds brought to you by Describe. Don't skip, it's good for you. So with all of that kind of out of the way, let's talk about the economy, because having magic would literally just break capitalism. So like, first of all, labor. If you can conjure workers with Unseen Servant or automate tasks with Mage Hand and Alarm and Tiny Servant, you don't need to hire people, you just enchant your workflows. A single enchanter can replace a factory floor's worth of low skill labor. Any jobs that require crafting, mending, repairs, anything. So why buy new boots when your current ones never wear out? If you're in the tailoring industry, well, that's completely gone. It's transformed into a luxury art market where clothes are more aesthetic than they are disposable. And the same goes for food, because you have Goodberry, which is literally my least favorite spell ever. I hate that spell. And then you have Create Food and Water, so scarcity gets really weird. Why are people starving and poor? Farms don't exist because they have to. At this point, they exist because magic is expensive to scale and you still want flavor in your diet. You know, because good berries taste like bland nutrition cubes or something. the script. Tomatoes still slap though. When did I write this? So food becomes about artistry, not survival. So let's just extrapolate that into everything. Magical patents become currency, because now you can have spells on lock. You can have scroll subscription services that are magic for people who can't do magic, that just comes to your door. Guilds run like tech startups that offer magical apps or whatever to have these enchantment services come to your house. So if you need to get to work, you just hop on a floating carpet or something, and if you need to send a message, you just cast sending, or you pay someone to do it for you. And again, that's just low-level magic. So you can see how an entire town would have an economy that revolves around a teleportation circle, because merchants don't need to travel into the city, they just ship goods through the circle. Which means that cities don't need to be built on rivers anymore, they become sort of like hubs where there's like sigils and teleportation circles everywhere. And yeah, all of that sounds amazing, obviously. Yeah, thank you, Lore Keeper. Why? Thanks for pointing out the obvious. That's all great if you've got the spell slots, but what about everyone else? Because if magic becomes infrastructure, and infrastructure requires access, then now we're talking about class divisions. We've already seen it with the internet and clean water and energy. We have everything we need on this planet, and somehow there's still entire swaths of populations that don't have access to the most basic needs. So in a magic-driven society, the divide isn't just rich and poor, it becomes spellcasters versus everyone else. Or I guess you could call it the magic literate versus the magic locked, right? If you can cast, you can survive. If you can't, then you can pay. And people who don't have access to magic can just have it delivered to their door, right? So it becomes like a, hey, if you want Featherfall for your commute, well, that's tier 2 access, and then you have to buy different plans. Arcane guilds will become sort of corporate empires, like it's some crazy twist on Cyberpunk. Temples can act as banks, therapists, and hospitals. And magic academies are like Harvard, but with like a nuclear reactor in the center. And we're not even talking about religion, because imagine how much religion would change when people start to see resurrection. If the rich just have a cleric on tap, then they become sort of immortal. And anybody who needs resurrection from any other service, right, you have to go find it, then that becomes a commodity. And it can literally become things where it's like, you know, thank you so much for submitting your resurrection form. You'll be reanimated in 3 to 5 days. It becomes bureaucracy. But what happens when only some people can get brought back? When every noble has that cleric, and then commoners are expected to just move on. Well, then that resurrection becomes a currency, and immortality becomes inheritance, and then suddenly the rich don't just have land, they have time, and nobody else does. And then meanwhile, in the underground level of that, necromancers can offer eternal life for a slightly higher price, and you know, you don't have to die, you just become an undead intern. And honestly, in that sort of economy, in that sort of world, there are lots of people that would probably take that deal. So that's all fine and dandy, but let's dig a little bit deeper. What about the higher level spells like Plane Shift or Finger of Death and Wish, for example? Because if cantrips can break industries, then 9th level spells are breaking reality. So let's just start with Wish. At a certain level, some guy, let's just call him Greg, went to Wizard University and eats pickled onions for lunch. And he can literally rewrite the fabric of the universe. He doesn't need to vote. He doesn't need a license. He just needs a quiet room and 6 seconds of uninterrupted hand gestures and muttering. That means you don't just have powerful individuals. You have literal existential threats that are just walking around in robes and sandals. So how do you enforce contracts when you have things like modify memory? How do you put someone in prison when they can just cast teleport? How do you run a country when someone can walk into your throne room, smile at you, and then cast power word kill? You would need entire institutions that are dedicated to magical containment, to truth verification, counterspell networks, divination audits. You would have things like a Ministry of Arcane Integrity or whatever. That wasn't Harry Potter. Your world's legal system wouldn't look like medieval England. It would look like the TSA at a Spelljammer airport, right? And then when you look at things like Plane Shift, people can just bounce between realities, between hell dimensions and fey realms and pocket heavens, and everything in between just doesn't matter. Geography doesn't matter anymore. Death doesn't matter anymore. And at any point, you could have somebody who just travels to another realm and brings back a demonic army. So nations wouldn't just train soldiers, they would have to train countermages and exorcists and divine snipers and have sort of arcane Cold War agents who can carry out some pretty crazy missions. Because at that level, when you're talking about that sort of reality-changing stuff, magic isn't just a tool or this cool thing that you can do, it can be a weapon of mass destruction. So if you think about the world we live in now, where weapons are controlled or non-existent if you live in a country that doesn't even allow them, but in a world with magic, you are the weapon. So there's no need for any sort of licensing or background checks or anything like that. You just memorize a new spell and now you're walking around with a mental suitcase full of fireballs and little pocket nukes. And that's not just scary, that's unsustainable for a culture or a society. So what you can see is that who you're allied with, which mages you're sponsoring, what planes you can access, becomes very important. So let's bring it home. What would the world with access to magic look like? Well, you would probably have things like floating cities, and you would have weather-regulated farmlands if you even need farms, teleportation networks instead of roads, libraries that can talk to you and find those books for you. You would have taverns that can exist in multiple places at once, and apartments and city blocks are just conjured when they're needed. You would have entire economies that are built around binding elementals and binding unparamounted levels of magic in order to power entire cities. Artificers that are debating ethics of grenades that can level a city block. You would have black magic markets. Magical black markets, that's what I meant to say, where you might be able to find illegal creatures or familiars or scrolls. And that's sort of what the real scale of magic looks like. It's not just flashy spells, it's not just a cool moment in a battle, but it's an entire world that has adapted to what we consider the impossible. So you can't have world-altering power in the hands of mortals and expect everything to stay static. It just doesn't work like that when you introduce a world-shaking technology or a science, which is really, again, just what magic is. The moment that magic becomes consistent, it becomes accessible and scalable, your world has to change. It has to change socially, economically, politically, spiritually. Because if you're still describing a medieval village where someone casts Wish on Sundays and then nothing ever changes, then you're not writing a magical world, you're just writing a world that we know that has magic sort of duct taped over the top. So here's the final question, I guess, and my whole point with this. If your world has magic and people are smart, why does it still look like the 1300s? And here's the real answer, and this is probably what some of you who are watching this that are seething, clutching the keyboard right now, waiting for the video to end so you can leave your weird comments. The real answer is that because you don't have to think about it that hard. It's just a game, right? It's fantasy. Just have a little fun with it. It's fun to get away and to read something or play something that feels so far away to what we know, right? Going back in time and then adding a twist to it. But in a reality with magic, it's not just medieval. It's not even steampunk. It's like post-industrial arcana. And I think that that's kind of the thing that draws me to things like Arcane or even to Shadow and Bone, even though I have my issues with that show. I think it's because it's a world that feels more familiar and more real with a system like magic. Anyways, I hope you liked this deep dive. It's been a while since I did one of these. It's fun to kind of go back and think about the large scale implications of magic, you know, just doing that little bit of research and going on a tangent. So, and now it's time for some quick shout outs. Mike Connie2270 says, Tobias spotted at 1945. Great video. Big fan of the channel here. I'm a big fan of you, Mike. I'm a big fan of you. Kev Robe 1 says 1950. Good catch. Someone with someone's name. Someone with some name says, I saw Tobias reading our comments. Well, Tobias likes to help out every once in a while, what else is he gonna do? Can't just sit here. Spinesauce2687 says, Tobias is here to party. When is he not? Now, if you were paying attention in today's video, leave a timestamp in the comments down below. Timestamp? Leave a timestamp with an M in the comments down below with where you saw Tobias in this video, and you just might get shouted out in the next video. Like, actually. Let me know in the comments down below. Oh my god, what happened there? Let me know in the comments down below. Let me know in the comments down below, how do you think that society would change if you had magic and just ignore everything that just happened? Thank you so much for watching. Forge on, my friends, and I'll see you next time. Are you still here? What do we do? I'm gonna walk away.